Yes.
Okay, so I'm not on the screen, am I?
You're visual and audio both.
Interesting. Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay, so now we are streaming. Man, oh man, Marion, if you could see me now. Oh, you can. You can see me now. You, hi, Renee. Hi, Paulie. Paul, I was
Hi.
at Cohn's. I was at Cohn's yesterday,
What?
and they are opening for seating.
Are they really?
That's what
Wow.
Lenny told me. Limited, just a few tables.
Right.
So I said, "Has Paul been here yet?" Said, "Not
I
yet."
only go in for bakery and at the deli.
Um,
Thanks.
so, yeah. Hold on. I don't see us yet, but that's not a big deal. But oh, there we are. Ha! Okay, that's kind of cool. Okay. I like this group. We're a quartet. We're like the Beatles.
After your
Do you
thing,
still need me when I'm
Hey, hold on. I'm testing something.
76?
Testing something. Hold on. Oh, see my text?
Yes.
All right, good.
yep.
That was just a test.
A text test.
Now, where is stop share? I see new share, pause share. Stop. Oh, there it is. Okay. You guys want to study or you want to? Things are crazy out there.
Awesome.
Crazy.
So, but after your essay today, I was going to call you and say, let's go on a road trip. Go up, the lake looked great. It's still there.
Yeah, I think July I'm heading up north.
Yeah.
All things being equal, just little getaway. But first we gotta. I don't know what we got. We've got. Did you see there was something going around that said 2020 started out like 1998 because it was the impeachment, right? Like 98,
Okay.
and then we had a little bit of what year was the 2001? I no. What year was the economic downturn?
2009,
8,
28, right?
2008. Okay.
7,
And
8.
then uh um oh right, no, well, we started with 1918.
The
Oh no,
virus.
then it went to 1918 because of the pandemic, and now we're in 68, 1968. So this one year has had all the worst 4 years in one year we're living through. So I hope you guys are doing all right. It's pretty crazy. I saw they were boarding up stores in the Loop and restaurants tonight. So somebody thinks some folks are going to the Loop tonight. So what can I
It's so
say?
sad that after they just started reopening, now you got to close all over again. Oh, it's just sick.
Yep, this is true. So just trying to hold it together and be prayerful and loving and understanding. But it's tough out there. So you guys okay? Marion, check in.
It's tough. I called together my retired Conway school teachers group, and
Hold
a
on
number of those people are Trump people. They're very conservative. We didn't talk politics, but I found it very hard to be as loving as we all used to be in the old days.
Yeah.
I'm finding it harder and harder to be and let be.
Yes. I'm letting people in.
Yes.
Bobby? Why do I have you twice? No. Okay, you're good. All right. Thanks. Hey, Lisa, Stan.
Hey,
Hello.
hey.
All right. Bobby, you there?
Well, he's tuned in, I think, but I don't know.
There he is.
Oh,
It's like he scored a
you,
touchdown.
Debbie.
Touchdown.
Hallelujah. Hi, Marion.
Hi, Bobby.
You were talking about Conway, your teachers.
Oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just checking. I was just having a check.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, Stan.
All right, buddy.
All right, you guys. So here, I really do want to do this actually. So just because things are so crazy, and just a brief check-in, then I'll start the study. I promise. I know you guys are like wanting to get down to it, but it's rough out there. So I just want to. So Marion checked in. Renee's next.
Well, I feel like my world has gotten very small, you know. There's a well-worn path, you know, between, let's say, the computer and the kitchen and the place where I sleep, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you have everything you need?
Yes, I'm very well equipped, supplied.
Why are there two of me?
And, you know, at the beginning, I was very content, able to amuse myself in lots of ways. Felt I had all those kind of resources. They are wearing very thin.
I hear you.
You know, it's just noticing all the ways in which, you know, sort of lack of input from other people.
Yeah.
It's just, it's sort of, you know, it's a fragile structure, you know, that sustains our connection.
Well, I miss you, Renee.
I miss being in the presence of people.
Bobby, you're interrupting.
Yeah. Why are there two me's?
Don't worry about it. All right. Stan and Lisa, quick check-in. How are you guys holding up?
I don't know. I have found today in particular just to be a really trying day. I think all the news and I just found poor Stan nearly had his head chopped off a few minutes ago because I just was snapping at him. But yeah, I've settled back down. But it's I'm glad to see people, and this is my fourth Zoom thing today, and I really appreciate the Zoom, but I find it very wearing as well.
Hear ya, Stan. Besides writing wonderful poetry, what's up?
Yeah. Actually, well, I can send it along to you. I wrote one about my friend Colleen, which I think I've told you about. It took me a while to get my mind around it to write something. That's not unusual. But anyway, so I feel I don't know, the pound count I was telling Lisa must have been 1,000 because my head just thought it was, I just couldn't get my head straight. But that's just going to happen from time to time because that's my sensitivity. But I did have a nice back and forth with people where I volunteered before, and that seems to be coming around, like the Missouri History Museum and the Connected Soldiers Military Memorial Museum. And they're starting to try to pull things together. And so that's good. I don't know what's going to happen to Ready Readers. I really, really, really miss Ready Readers. Because I used to go every Thursday, and my whole line with them was, before I left was, remember, you made my day. And I haven't been able to say that to them.
Well, I'm sure they miss you too, Stan. How about you, Robert? Checking in. How about you, Robert? Checking in.
I'm doing great.
Very good. Good. I'm glad.
No problems.
All right.
No complaints.
Good to hear it. Really.
I'm just floating over it all. I'm in the stratosphere. Everything's good.
All right.
Over here.
Helene.
I want to know if Bobby is going to be Santa Claus next year. Look at how long his beard is getting. I mean, it's perfect. It's getting harder to sustain the bubble that I live in, where everything is nice and fine and full of white privilege and full refrigerator and all that blessings that I have.
In
The last week I saw that PBS special on anti-Semitism, and that really rocked my sense of security. And then the riots started, and I'm so terrified about civil society and the future of the United States. So I go out on long walks and, try to escape it. But that whole sense of fear and insecurity that I've had my whole life about the safety of the perilousness of our existence, I should say, is coming up higher. But meanwhile, life is happy in our condo, and I am too busy now to check in on all the CRC activities that I miss that are all on video. There just isn't enough time in the day for all the good Zooms and podcasts and things like that. But I'm excited. I initiated a Zoom with a couple of my Clayton High School classmates that live in Norway and Belgium and England. And we're going to Zoom tomorrow, and hopefully we won't just talk about high school, but we will talk about what the situations are for them.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Helene.
Well, that's interesting.
Zoom over the world, right? So
Yeah.
Polly.
You can always binge Randy if you get those half-hour things.
That sounds disturbing. Paul,
I thought that was on your list of things to do this week, Stan.
Paul Hershkowitz, check it in, buddy. You're muted though. There you go.
Thank you. Like everybody, following a lot of the Zoom courses, which I am so appreciative of. I'm sure everybody else is. Still have my job, so that keeps me busy 50% of the day sometimes. But I really miss the face-to-face and the warmth and the high fives, and hate what's going on in this country today. You try to break it down and you just can't break it down because there's just no solution at hand. A quick solution, I should say.
Yeah.
And I don't see this going away for a while.
Well, thanks, you guys. I just needed to hear your voice.
Well, how are you doing?
I'll tell you. But before I do that, I just want to send everybody my blessings of strength and perseverance and courage and those things that lift you up. Embrace them, and the things that disturb you, we have to sort of face them as well. So, but I just know that I feel like although I have to be at home, I'm here for you, and I'm doing okay. I'm working hard on these. We have just so you guys know, because you're regulars. This Shabbat we have a bar mitzvah for the morning service, and then we have a Havdalah bat mitzvah at 4, and people can tune in to both of those on Facebook. They're totally there are two Bobbies, but that's all right.
It's your multiple personalities.
Yeah. So
Randy, which kids are doing the bars and the box?
yeah. So the bar mitzvah on Saturday morning is Jake Egler, and then the bat mitzvah. Watch you mute yourself, Bobby. And then the bat mitzvah at 4:00 is Annabelle Lang. So anyways, we've been working at really trying to make that. Special because we're all going to be in our own homes, but we have videos of Andrew and Leslie and all kinds of different things we're going to put into the service. So so working hard to kind of make those happen. It's very frustrating to work with kids like this when all I want to do is burst through the screen and be there with them, but I can't, and so they're, in some ways, it's probably good for them too to really know they can do it, and I'm, we're there, and we can be helpful, but it's obviously not the same as being next to a kid and guiding them through it. The other thing that's happening with me, just to be, I don't know, just to kind of put it out there, is, you know, I'm not participating in any of the demonstrations because we've been very proactive as a congregation about really the public health situation and staying at home and social distancing. And so for me, if I can't go to someone's house for a small bar mitzvah, it's hard for me to reconcile going to even as passionate as I am about the cause, going to a demonstration with hundreds of people. You know, so that's, you know, I think I'm just working through it. We're going to put out a statement in the next couple of days to kind of just so people know what we're doing and why we're doing it, what we're not doing and why we're not doing it. And, you know, obviously,
amen, Randy. I really
in Ferguson
talking about that.
Yeah, Ferguson, you know, it felt for about 6 months like being in Ferguson was a second full-time job, and you know, not being able to be helpful on the ground is hard. But so anyway, that's all happening in my rabbinic life. And in my personal life, some of you know that Gabe actually had one of those famous graduations that have been in vogue now, with a car parade and a car procession and an actual diploma. And it was actually very lovely, against all of our expectations, which were low. It felt like a real graduation, and I felt, you know, it was very sweet and powerful and festive.
Wow.
There you go.
Is he going to George Washington next year?
Georgetown.
Georgetown. Okay.
Yeah.
Are they going to hit campus, as far as you know? I mean, you know.
Are they what?
Hit campus?
They don't know yet. End of June will be kind of they'll let us know. There's all kinds of stuff being floated out there, and then I'll start the study. But like, there's things being talked about, like starting earlier.
Oh.
So then at Thanksgiving, when the students go home, they don't come back until spring. They're talking about maybe no roommates. I've heard about schools that are thinking about only freshmen and seniors on campus, where sophomores and juniors are learning online, to lower the numbers on campus, but to allow the new kids and the kids that are exiting to have their campus. So there's a lot floating out there.
All right.
I don't know.
Nice.
All right. You all ready?
I wanted to say one thing. I saw we were watching a movie Saturday night, and the people hugged, and oh my gosh, my whole heart just like went, oh my God. I was so envious.
Yeah. Feels like a different era, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did read in Gabe's wake up the other morning that, was it Eli Lilly or somebody was working on something to help cure it. And I'm so tired of waiting for the vaccine, because I'm not taking a vaccine that hasn't been tested for a year and a half. But if they come up with ways to cure it and minimize it while we have it, just like they did with HIV, that was my hopeful sign. And this was supposed to be tested by the end of June. And that's what I've been focusing on. It's like, quit the paranoia about we can't do anything until we have a vaccine. We can go out again when you can get treatment and you can survive it.
That's very, very interesting. It's all out there. So let's study a little bit. I have a prepared lesson, or I don't know if I'd call it that, but a teaching, something I've never really taught before in this way. So I'm looking forward to it. But let's make our blessing, and then I'll introduce what it is we're going to be studying. So maybe take our minds and hearts off of the everything just for a little bit, and kind of go somewhere just totally different. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav
la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
The mitzvah of Torah study that is timeless, and yet up to date all at the same time, which is pretty cool. So here's the deal. I decide. So this month of June, we decided again to kind of actually even looser than May, because May was sort of tied to the Omer and Pirkei Avot. But in June, we just said, like, let's just alternate teachers, Jim, Susan, Danny, Karen, and each of us will just teach a class that we want to teach on Tuesday. As it turns out, that's going to be the case for 3 of the Tuesdays. Karen Bogart has a special guest for 2, and all of a sudden, it sounded really interesting, but I'm spacing out totally who it is and what they're talking about. But it sounded really cool. I think next week is Rabbi Jim, and then 2 in a row for Karen's mystery guest. I can't remember. And then finally, I think Susan or Daniel's going to end it up, because there's 5 Tuesdays in June. And then we'll take July off like we do when we're at the synagogue. And that's University Series. So I decided actually to do something radically different for University Series and actually do the Parsha. Right? And in particular, a really specific not the whole Parsha, which we never do really anyway, but a very specific part of the portion. And then because it relates to the Haftorah so strongly, we're going to look at the Haftorah, and then we're going to look at a really interesting modern take on the whole thing by Rabbi Rami, who I think all of you know, Rami Shapiro. So that's kind of the sweep of what I want to do. What I'm talking about is the Nazarite Vows, which is part of this Torah portion, Naso. Right, Marion is doing the hair, the international signal of hair, and of course, I'm not going to dwell on the hair, but it's hard to ignore. I did get a haircut, I have to say.
Yeah,
you can shame me if you want. But it was a safe situation, and I'll say no more.
Where did you get a haircut?
I'm not
Did
telling.
Amy do it?
No. I mean, I don't see it.
Okay, well, good. I'll tell you what, it was really bad, like it was like really damaged. Okay, so all right,
Okay.
So we're gonna go to text, and the way I've kind of come upon doing this in this format is, let me see if there's anybody. No, I think this is us. I'll do a few texts, and then I'll come back to the full screen Zoom so we can talk and discuss.
Okay.
But I'm going to share my screen here. And there's the text. Everyone see it?
Here it is.
Okay. So I haven't labeled this. I should really do that, but I will. So we're going to start with the Torah.
Could you enlarge it a bit?
Can I do what?
Could you expand your screen a bit?
Does that do it?
Make it larger. Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Okay. Leave it there. That's good.
Okay. You can really very easily sort of sum up what the Nazir is all about, what the Nazarite vow is all about. Doesn't take very long. As you can see, it's 7 verses, but this is the kind of the condensed version, but it's really all you need to know. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have looked at this before. But this is the law of the Nazarite vow. People who take the Nazarite vow are sometimes called Nazir. Nazir comes from the Hebrew it's one of the words that means separation, right? So we'll get to what that means in a second. You'll see it in the English translation. So we have in Naso, we're in the book of Numbers, and of course this is also the portion with the priestly blessing, which I think we have to end with, of course, because it's such a powerful moment of Torah. But before the priestly blessing, we have God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, if a man or woman chooses to separate themselves and take a Nazarite vow of abstinence for my sake," my being God's sake, "they shall abstain from anything made from wine and grapes, even the pips and skins. No razor shall cut their hair, and shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow, and they shall not come near a dead person. For the crown of God is upon the Nazarite's head. All of the days of their abstinence they are holy, holy unto God. So I'm going to do two texts, then come back. But the first text, obviously, or not obviously, but in my view, takes a very positive, it tells you the facts. What does it mean to take a Nazarite vow? It really means those three things. You abstain from wine, you abstain from cutting your hair, and you don't go to funerals or touch a dead body or anything like that. Those are really the three things. It can be anybody. We see man or woman, which is obviously not ordinary in Torah speak, but anybody. These aren't the priests, although there is discussion that they are sort of like kind of, I don't know, what's that, para-priests, like paralegals. They're trying to be holy like a priest, even though they could come from any situation or any tribe or any class. But they so they take this vow voluntarily, and they for that time they follow those three rules. And what's their prize? They're holy unto God, right? So this vow makes them holy. So you might think this is a positive thing, right?
Yes.
But then there's another part of the Nazarite vow which leads to a really interesting back and forth between the generations of commentators, whether it is negative or whether it is positive, or is it negative, right? And I'm going to go back to us after the second Torah before we go to the commentators and see what people have to say, and then we'll check out the commentaries. So it says further down in the portion, just a few lines down, on the day that his term as a Nazarite is completed. So what do we know from that? You can end your time as a Nazir. You can stop your vow. You're a Nazir as long as you want to be, and you complete it. What happens when you complete it? You shall be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed, and you shall offer an offering, a sin offering, among others, but this is the one that the commentators pick up on. A sin offering. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay. Lisa.
Could one be, given that it talks about ending being a Nazarite, does that mean one could not live one's entire life as a Nazarite? That it had to come to an end?
I don't know. I mean, some of these questions aren't answerable. But I mean, I think a read of the portion would tell you that no. I mean, I think it's voluntary in and voluntary out.
Okay,
that's what I would say. Yeah, and I feel pretty secure at interpreting it that way. There's nothing in the portion that suggests you can't end it, but they want to tell you that you're able to end it if you so desire.
gotcha.
Anybody else? Yes, Paulie.
Okay, so I was reading Rabbi Hirsch's explanation of it of Nazarites, and the thing was he was saying how on average it was like a 6-month average that they did the abstaining, and I was thinking, like you just said, I would think it was more like trying to be the Levites or any of the priests.
Well, we're gonna get to. We'll see. The 6-month thing sounds like that comes from Midrash to me. In other words,
okay.
But that doesn't mean it's not important or interesting. It just means that a lot of the times when you see something like that, there's no, like, where does he get 6 months? There's no months in the Torah, right?
Right.
Right, but so I would imagine, I don't know that Midrash, but my guess would be that he's pulling from a Midrash. And remember, in the Orthodox world, the oral Torah is from Sinai just as much as the written Torah. So there's a lot of conflation with the Midrashim, and that's fine. Again, I'm not belittling that. I'm just saying, that feels like a very specific thing to say. And
that's why I was asking. Now, were they looked down upon, the Nazarites?
So these are great questions. These are great sort of fodder for Midrash. But actually, we're going to see two a kind of opposing sides in the commentaries. So my answer to your question right now, Paul, would be yes and
Wait.
no.
Okay.
Marion.
Is this still happening, or did it cease when the temple went down
Ceased.
because of the sacrifice part?
Yeah, I mean, it was the Nazarite vow is definitely very tied into the whole. It's part of the Torah that it just doesn't. Now that's why it's interesting. We're going to end this study with sort of a modern. Rami's going to say we can bring back the Nazarite vow in a new form, but no, there are no Nazarites, and there have not been Nazarites for a long time. We're going to also read the story of the most famous Nazir, that's the Haftorah, in a minute too. So yeah, Renee.
So they're separating themselves, but as individuals, not as a separate community. Is that correct?
Yes. I think that's a good way to look at it. I don't think the Nazarites. Yes, I think each individual Nazir separated themselves out to have this sort of this status of holiness. It's almost, well, what's the modern equivalent? To me, it
sounds monastic.
Yes, I was going to say being a monk, right? Yeah. Very much so. Monks take vows, right? They sort of separate themselves from mainstream life. They're not priests, so they're not clergy, but they're sort of these individuals that have taken upon themselves to live this different kind of, the word is ascetic, right? Life. And that's very, I mean, it's only 3 things, but, no drinking, not, what does that mean? I think it says you don't care about how you look, right? It kind of reduces the ego part. You're just kind of letting your hair grow natural and wild, and so you've given up intoxicants, you've given up sort of vanity, writ large, and then the dead body thing is very much tied into the the whole notion of purity, because the priests that directly mirrors the priests who also can't come into contact with the dead body. So
there's
one more,
also,
then go ahead.
I don't get any sense that they separate themselves off in a living way from the community. I mean, there's no injunction there against marriage or sexual relations, or doing business or working.
It's a spiritual cutoff. It's a spiritual cutoff, and I think I think it was Paul who said, did people like them? Well, you could see if you wanted to kind of paint a modern scenario that maybe these would be very self-righteous people, right? Like they're amongst us, but maybe they have this sense that they're above us, that they've sort of taken upon themselves to be holy or holier. So I think it's and in that sense. Helene.
I'm seeing this as a marvelous loophole in the rules, that if somebody has a sense of holiness, I think back to when Moses said if we were all could be priests, that if you weren't born a Levite or a son of Aaron, you had a chance to do holy work. And I'm making an inference, since they mentioned the sin offering, that if you have done something that you feel bad about, there is a way that you can absolve yourself of the guilt by, pledging yourself to God, or if you make a pledge to God to get you out of a bad situation, that there's a way that you can work it out. And the fact that women have the chance to do it, I mean, it's just the most, I've never looked at it as a loophole before, but I think it's great, because if you've got the spiritual desire to commit yourself to something higher than yourself, here's an opportunity. But it also makes me wonder what barbershops look like in ancient days. I mean, we never think about that, but they must have had good scissors.
By the way, that's all very illuminating, and I like this notion of a loophole, right? It kind of lets people somewhat out of sort of the caste system. If you have to be born a priest, but this gives someone a way to like kind of at least approach that sort of status. Again, that's what it always seemed to me that the best of what a monk is just sort of an earnest person, right? Who can't really live in the world as it is, and kind of sort of spiritually removes themselves by kind of studying and praying and kind of taking all that on, even as they're sort of still part of the world, but there's a part of them that is removed from it. So what I wanted to say was, you reminded me about the hair thing, and then we're going to go to more text, is the Rastafarian culture in Jamaica. This is their proof text as to why they don't cut their hair and grow them in locks, dreadlocks. The whole notion is that the Rastafarians, who are not all Jamaicans, are not Rastafarians. And in fact, there's some friction between the Rastafarians in Jamaica and non-Rastafarians. And the Rastafarians see themselves as being as being holier than the rest of society, and not cutting their hair, and they probably do they abstain from? We know that they don't abstain from marijuana, but they do really point to this Nazarite and I think some Rastafarians actually call themselves modern Nazarites. So there's that. I'm going to go to the text, and I want to get to some commentaries, and I think you'll hear echoes of Helene in at least one of them. So first we're going to look at, you see where the Talmud, it says Rabbi Eliezer. So that's the first thing I want to look at. Rabbi Eliezer picks up on this idea that it was a sin offering that they make before they complete their vow. Or they, once they complete their vow, they make a sin offering. And Rabbi Eliezer says, what is his sin, the Nazir? Must conclude that it refers to his denying himself the enjoyment of wine. If then, right? If then he that merely denied himself the enjoyment of wine is dubbed a sinner, all the more so does this apply to the person who denies himself the enjoyment of the other pleasures of life. Rabbi Eliezer stated, he is... you know what? That was a different rabbi. I'm sorry. I did this kind of not quickly, but I'll look it up. But this other rabbi in the Talmud disagreed with Rabbi Eliezer, and he said he's called holy. If then the person who denied themselves the enjoyment of wine is nevertheless called holy, how much more does this apply to the person who denied themselves the enjoyment of other things? So these are mirror arguments, and it's very Talmudic. These two rabbis had this argument, and they used each other's language. So one rabbi is saying, picking up on the fact that it's a sin offering, and saying you shouldn't deny yourself things that are legal to you. You should deny yourself things that are forbidden, but why would you deny yourself things that are okay? Like, no one says you shouldn't drink wine. Why would you do that? And then the other rabbi counters by saying, no, look, they're called holy. It is holy to deny yourself things even if they're allowable, right? It makes you holier to deny yourself. So you've got this really interesting, I think, argument. And it kind of goes to what Paul said. Did people like these guys? Well, it looks like, there's one side that says, they were holy, and they kind of took it upon themselves to be holier. Another side said they're
Meshugana.
Exactly. They're crazy. Why would they do that? That seems, and in fact, not only are they crazy, but it's a sin, and the proof of that is that before they could end their time as a Nazir, they have to make a sin offering. Okay, so that frames the argument. Now we have some later commentators, including, of course, our friend Maimonides. And I'm going to do all these commentaries, and then we'll come back and talk about them before we go on to Samson. So these are really interesting. So this is Maimonides. Our Torah, about which King David stated, in the book of in Samuel, the Torah of God is perfect, right? So Maimonides is predicating if it's in the Torah, he's establishing his yichus. So I'm going to quote the Bible, the Torah. So he said it's perfect, and he said the Torah advocates no mortification. The Torah's intention was that people should follow nature, taking the middle road, and that's a big Maimonides concept. The middle road, no extremes, right? Don't go to extremes. Follow the middle road. He would have been like a centrist in American political parlance, right? He should He should eat his fill in moderation, drink in moderation. He should dwell amidst society in uprightness and faith, and not in deserts and mountains. So this is sort of a slam against sort of the monk idea of separating yourself, whether it's physically in the desert or mountain, or spiritually, like we're talking about. His hair should not afflict his body, right? He shouldn't let his hair grow to the point where it feels nasty. And again, the dreadlocks are dreadlocks because you don't wash it and you let it grow. On the contrary, the Torah explicitly warned us regarding the Nazarites. Therefore, our sages commanded us to deny ourselves only the things denied him by the Torah. You shall not inflict on yourself vows of abstinence, things permitted him. Thus, our sages stated, it is not sufficient for you that which the Torah has forbidden, but you should forbid yourself. This is kind of like, I have to read it in a certain tone of voice. I'm going to start over, but this is the tone. It's kind of sarcastic, ironic. It's kind of this very Jewish voice. Hold on, here we go. It is not sufficient for you that which the Torah has forbidden, but you should forbid yourself other things too. How's that?
Good.
This includes those who are given to fasting. In other words, don't fast if it's not a fast day. Our sages forbid, I don't know what that is. Oh well, I'm going to skip that. I must have messed that up. So then he quotes Ecclesiastes, be not too righteous, because that's an extreme, too righteous. Neither make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? That's in Ecclesiastes. So this is Maimonides saying, Nazarite vows no good, right? He doesn't mention the sin offering thing, but he might as well have, right? He just says that this is not the way human beings are supposed to live. But then, he goes on. This is something different. That's Rami. I gotta cut and paste that later. Maimonides, another medieval commentator. Now he takes the opposite view, right? So we have, is the Nazir holy or is the Nazir a sinner? So Maimonides is sinner, to put it plainly or simply. Maimonides says, this person sins against himself when he forsakes vows of abstinence, when the days of separation are fulfilled. Wait a minute. So Maimonides has said, you sin when you stop being a Nazir, not when you become one. He had separated himself to be holy unto God, and by rights he should always, who said this? Who said about, does it ever end? Or somebody said that. Should always continue to live a life of holiness and separation to God, in accordance with the verse. And this is from Amos, the prophet, interestingly enough. And I raised up your sons for prophets, and of your young man for Nazarites. Right? So people are supposed to be Nazarite-like. There, the Nazarite is equated to the prophet. This is back to Maimonides. Similarly, the Torah states, all the days of his separation, he shall be holy unto God. Now that he returns to defile himself with worldly passions, he requires atonement. A whole different look on this. Maimonides says, that's crazy to deny yourself stuff. Maimonides says it's crazy to stop. If you took on this, that means you were meant for a life of asceticism, of monkhood, of being a Nazir. And the fact that you're giving it up, you're allowed to, but The reason you have to make a sin offering before you give it up is because it's sinful that you wanted to give it up. So I don't remember, somebody said, it was 6 months, or should it be for the lifetime? Well, Maimonides says it should be as short as possible, if at all. And Maimonides says, if you get into this thing and you want to be a Nazir, you should be in it for the long haul. So one more, and this is sort of maybe an in-between. I'm not sure, but we'll talk about it on the other side. The Rama, another rabbi. People must divert their evil inclinations from the extreme to the middle way. And that's very Maimonidean, the middle way, right? No extremes. This is the basic idea of the Nazarites. When they abstain, because they observe that they have a weakness for worldly pleasure. So this goes back to Helene. This says a person who becomes a Nazir maybe has done so because they have something they feel guilty about, right? So it's kind of like they're becoming a Nazir to balance out their earlier life of being whatever. They must go to the other extreme, right? So they were lousy on the end of the spectrum, and now they go to the other extreme in order to attain the middle way. So the goal is the middle way. Therefore, the Torah states, he shall be holy, since the holiness of the Nazarite will only really be in evidence later on, after they have completed the days of their, I love this word, by the way, Nazariteship. That's definitely a made-up word. Nazariteship, Nazaritehood. Only then will he have attained the middle way, not at the time of taking the vow, when he had sinned and was imperfect. This is the meaning of the statement, and make atonement for that he had sinned. This is because the abstention of the Nazarite was only commanded to abstain in order to achieve a good purpose, the attainment of the middle way. So the Rama is saying you become a Nazir when you've kind of sunk so low that your only remedy is going to the holier than thou extreme for a short time. You make your sin offering because you had been a sinner, but you've rectified it by being a Nazir, and now you're back in the middle where where everyone ought to be. Okay? All right, so let's talk about it. That was something, huh? Pretty cool. So what do you think? So we have Maimonides, Nachmanides, and the Rama. Any just raise your hand. Any thoughts, comments? Who resonates more with you? Anybody?
I like the middle road.
Yeah. Middle road.
But I understand people who have the need to be at an extreme, especially if they have passions, Yetzer Hara or Yetzer Hara, that they need to control, and perhaps this wasn't a way to enforce a discipline upon themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think that's
it saves you. Instead of a 12-step program, they would go off and separate themselves to control their impulses or to forgive themselves for something.
Okay, thanks. Paulie?
So what they're giving up is the grapes. Let's just say the wine.
Right.
They're not cutting their hair. And it says that I don't know if you said it or if I read it, that women can also become a Nazir.
Yes.
Okay, and they are going to give up drinking because, like Helene said earlier, I don't know what kind of barbershops they had back then, but what are they really giving up other than wine?
Are they giving up sex? In there too?
You could interpret that, but it's not explicit in the Torah. So listen, I mean, I think the three things, which we'll explore kind of in a different way with Rami, the three things are, I think, maybe symbolic for the real deal about being a Nazir is that you separate yourself to be holy for God, right? So the three things are sort of the outward things. You don't cut your hair, you don't drink, you don't go by a dead body. But I think it's the interior things that really make a Nazir, that you really are trying to live a life much just devoid of, I hate this term, but earthly pleasures, right? Which is why Maimonides thinks that, in Maimonides and the Rama think it's not something you want to do for a long time, because we were meant to have earthly pleasures. We're not supposed to go overboard and be sinful, right? Now, so there's different kind of ways to look at it. So I kind of just love the argument, and I love the way it's framed by the Nazir should be holy, which seems, oh, that's good, and the Nazir should make a sin offering, oh, that's bad. And you get these commentators that take off in either direction based on those two Torah passages.
Well, then basically they weren't able to, let's say, celebrate all the different holidays, such as Passover, with the 4 glasses of wine or grape juice.
There you go. Stan.
Well, I was just wondering, there seems to be, and someone mentioned this earlier in passing, there seems to be a rehab aspect to it, maybe.
Rehab, yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of what the Rama was saying. Yeah. Is that you kind of like yeah, for sure. I mean, you were living a life astray, and one vision of a remedy for that is to go all the way to the other side, and then hopefully to use a good term in the computer world, toggle back to the center. Now remember, but there was other commentators who said no, like Maimonides it was, who said no, that's a good way to live. Everyone else, the non-Nazirs, who there are obviously more of than the Nazirs, they just couldn't hack it. The Nazir has this inner strength to abstain from all these things. So and it's just a very different outlook. Renee, were you wanting to jump in? Marion?
I don't know where I want to go with this, but there's something about how very public it is. Because once you cut your hair, you're declaring it. People know. It's an external sign of an internal place you're at. And I don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah, really interesting. You made me think of something that I'm going to, again, like kind of these my cultural references. I think some of yours too, but David Crosby has this great song, "Almost Cut My Hair,"
right?
and then he says, "Well, I decided not to cut my hair because I wanted to let my freak flag fly." So there was this sort of notion of long hair, especially in the '60s, being symbolic of something, and if you cut it, it was as if you were publicly stating you were separating yourself from what you were from the movement or something like that. But yeah, no doubt, people knew. You would both know a Nazir when they were a Nazir because of their hair, and you would know when they stopped being a Nazir because of their hair. Yes. Yes, Helene.
Well, this makes me wonder about ways that you could define a modern Nazir. I mean, look at vegans or vegetarians. What kind of things they're publicly separating themselves from.
Yep.
But I also think it's kind of ironic because we have already, at the point of this, this was written, separated ourselves from pork, which I haven't had pork in like 40 years. I had a couple slices of bacon and a piece of ham, and
this isn't confession, Helene.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
But I remember leading a Torah study once when I was at BSKI, and we were reading about giving up pork, and I said something about, well, I gather there's something really good about pork, that Christians have it for their Christmas meals and their Easter meals, so it's their big meal. And there's a bunch of Jews of choice there, and they all nodded their head, yeah. So there's degrees of separation that we're already doing, and that you can continue to do as a Nazarite. And we don't look down on people who separate themselves from these kinds of things.
For sure, but remember, what some of the commentators said. They said it's enough that we abstain from the things that we have to abstain from, like pork.
Oh, I forgot that line.
Right, like that's in the Torah, right? But so why would you then take upon yourself extra stuff to abstain from that the Torah doesn't say? Doesn't say you can't have wine. So why would you now? So again, that's just one perspective, but definitely that perspective says it almost uses your argument as an argument against the Nazir going overboard or too far. So, you guys ready for Samson?
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa.
well, I guess, I mean, there are things that we are told in Torah that we are to restrict. But is the Nazarite, I don't know, showing pride or being prideful or arrogant by adding more things to remove him or herself from, or to separate from? In other words, is the Nazarite taking on, is the Nazarite overstepping his or her bounds and is that the sin? It's a lack of humility, I guess.
Right. Yeah, those are good questions. Now, remember, though, I mean, the Torah, it's from Torah where we get the idea of the Nazarite vow. So it's not as if the Torah isn't saying, don't do this. But again, it all depends on the motivation, I think, of the person who's making this decision. So I want to go to the Samson. So
Right.
this is the Haftorah, which is like, you guys know this, but like sometimes the connection between the Torah and Haftorah is kind of lame, like it's a stretch, and
Right.
sometimes it's really strong. So like, for example, the portion where, the portions where we build the tabernacle in the desert are paired with passages from, the building of the temple. So that's an obvious connection, right? So this one's obvious too. Why is the story of Samson, which is a really interesting story and kind of is one of those stories from the Bible that's transcended the Bible into like cartoon land and folk hero, and probably comes from a mythological character that was predated the Torah. A lot of the scholars believe that Samson was an existing kind of prototype that the Torah or the Bible sort of, kind of absorbed. But this flawed hero or something like that. So this is from the book of Judges. And, just to give you a little background, the book of Judges is this succession of these leaders that would pop up and they would kind of then fizz out, right? And this was before there were kings, right? There weren't supposed to be kings of Israel. So there was this kind of quasi ruler called a judge. And there was this, I mean, like literally like a parade of judges that came through the book of Judges. And Samson is the last of the judges. So Samson was a leader of Israel. Wasn't a kingdom yet, but it was sort of, it was the promised land that had been entered into by the former slaves' descendants. But we don't read anything about Samson's being a ruler or a leader. It's very odd. It's very much of a folk tale or a story, and we don't hear how he leads. We do hear about his strength and about all the Philistines he killed, which I guess is supposed to tell us that's what he did as a leader. But I kind of put together a very kind of quick from the book of Judges, not all from the Bible, but sort of a abridged version of the story. And this is obviously a familiar story, but I wanted to also emphasize the spots where the reason that here I'm going to go back for a second. The reason that the Torah and the Haftorah put together, I kind of missed the punchline, is because Samson is a Nazir, right? And he's called a Nazir in the Bible. He was born a Nazir, which is very weird and interesting because, for all we know, you're supposed to voluntarily become a Nazir. But in this case, Samson was sort of pre-ordained a Nazir, kind of like it's the Dalai Lama, right, who gets chosen when they're like a toddler, right?
Yeah.
It feels, now this was even before he was born, but it has that feel to it, like this child is destined to be a Nazir. So I'm going to just read it, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll have a little time for Rabbi Rami. Here we go. You guys ready for a little bedtime story or something like that?
Yeah.
The story of Samson. A certain man of Zorach named Manoach, from the clan of the Danites, right, the tribe of Dan, had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of God appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now, see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean." There you go with the pork. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So he's destined to be this leader. The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson, Shimshon in Hebrew. He grew, and the Lord blessed him. God blessed him. And the Spirit of God began to stir him while he was in Machane Dan, a place between Zorach and Eshtaol, which is where the airport is, I think. Presently, not then. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of God came powerfully upon him. This has happened before. This happens repeatedly in Samson's life. The Spirit of God, which we assume is this Nazarite part of him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Samson had an eye for women, which later, I don't include this part, but I think many people know, his eyes got gouged out by the Philistines, and the rabbis said it was because he kept looking after women and they gouged his eyes out, especially Philistine women. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of God came powerfully upon him again. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, I think there's a song about this, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men, killed 1,000 Philistines. So then Samson kind of made up a song about it. He said, "With a donkey's jawbone, I made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men." Then she said to him, another woman he was with, I don't think this is Delilah. Yeah, this is Delilah. The final woman in Samson's what life. She said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the third time you made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." So, again, we didn't ever know from the Torah that becoming a Nazir made you super strong. This is a Samson-specific thing, but clearly, the writers of this story are trying to tell us that, this notion of being holy and choosing and becoming a Nazir or being a Nazir gave you these very special qualities. But Samson screwed up, and of course Delilah was working for the Philistines, and she put him to sleep on her lap. She called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. Don't ever think that number 7 was an accident. Obviously, he had 7 braids, 7 a holy number, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free," just like he did in the other chapter when he ripped the rope and killed 1,000, 3,000. But he did not know that God had left him. And that's really important. Remember, when you're a Nazir, you separate yourself for God. Well, Samson had given up his Nazarite vow or being a Nazir by getting his hair cut. So the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Here comes his hair. When they put him along the pillars, and this is the famous image of Samson with the pillars.
Right.
Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." I think he knew his hair was growing, right? Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. They kind of made him like a circus monkey, made him perform. Then Samson prayed to God, "Sovereign God, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." So then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died while he lived. And that, my friends, is the abridged story of Samson, who did die at the end. I will say a couple things about the rabbis in Samson, because the rabbis commented on the whole Bible. We tend to focus more on the rabbis' commentary on the Torah, but they commented on the Bible. And what they say is that Samson did not deserve to be a Nazir. One, because he had this roving eye for women and Philistine women. 2, because he gave up the secret and got his hair cut. But 3, because he never, even though he was a judge, he never really showed concern for the nation or whatever, the people. Even at the end, he said, "Give me my strength back because I want revenge for what they did to me." And the rabbis said he was selfish. It was all about Samson. He was supposed to be the judge, the ruler of Israel, and all he cared, he didn't live up to his destiny. Remember the very beginning, the reason that God made him a Nazir so he could be a leader, and the rabbis really kind of tisk at Samson that even though he ended up victorious, he never kind of lived up to his promise as a leader. So with that, anybody have any? And of course, the very strong connection between why this is the Haftorah, because it's all about, now he's a failed Nazir, but still a Nazir. He's the only Nazir we know, and so it was a natural Haftorah for Naso. Any comments, questions, thoughts before we get to Rabbi Rami to finish us off? We're good?
I think the sages were jealous. They were never that strong, and they never got that many pretty women.
It's a really good point, because Samson, was everything that the rabbis weren't, right? They were kind of intellectual, and Samson was much more physical. It's a good point. That's what, one of the maybe it's the reason that the rabbis hated Esau too, right? That there was something about these characters that maybe it's a really interesting point. We're threatening to the rabbis. Could be.
Yeah, I mean, he did go out and do battle and protect the people, not in an intellectual, but in a physical way.
Good point.
Well, I think you touched on it before, Randy, when you said it's like a folktale. He's very much of a folk hero, and he has some of those qualities of appealing to the perhaps lowest common denominator. So, this is reminiscent of Robin Hood stories, Ned Kelly, Blackjack Davy. He's a bit of an outlier in every way and somewhat ungovernable. So, and that, I think the Nazarites have something of that character. The practice is delineated in a kind of way that strikes me as, okay, if you can't beat them, join them. there are going to be these people who are going to do this. So let's create a sort of description of like some parameters that they'll observe.
Yeah, really, really great. Thank you for Helene and Renee. You got something
I
else?
would suggest that James Bond is very much a modern Samson.
Perfect. Yeah.
And he always
I
gets the
don't know-
women,
I
and
don't
then
know
he's got to get himself out of the trouble that he gets himself into because he's gotten himself a woman.
But this is an enduring folk
motif.
image, you know.
Yeah.
You can turn on the television any evening and you can find various versions of.
Well, he's a flawed hero, hero, right? Like he obviously, yes, for sure.
Someone
All right,
who
go ahead.
pursues justice, but not in. He doesn't follow the strict guidelines of the established practices.
I like how you called him an outlier. That was perfect.
Yeah.
That was perfect.
Good.
All right, tell you what, I'm gonna so this is long, and I'm gonna do the best I can to keep it interesting. How did I do well telling the story? Was I?
Yeah.
Oh, it was perfect.
Okay. So this is so let me give a background because this we'll end on this and then we'll do the priestly blessing and then we'll all call it a night. So Rabbi Rami Shapiro is just he's very iconoclastic. He's very just an interesting guy. He came to CRC a number of years ago as a scholar in residence, and he just he's kind of an anti-hero himself. This really renegade. He never really kind of fit into pulpit rabbinate. He spent time in the Reconstructionist movement and the humanistic movement, and now he's Jewish Renewal. But he's a really prolific guy. He's written books and ebooks, and I could do a whole class on Rami. But years ago, he published some kind of essay that I found on the internet about updating the Nazarite vow for today's world. And that was really, really fascinating. When I thought about doing this study, I thought of it, and I couldn't get to CRC in time to find it. I'm sure it's in my files. So I would start searching on the internet, and I couldn't find it. I was so shocked. Everything you can find on the internet. I finally found it wasn't the same thing, but it was this blog he did for a number of years, it looks like. And within the blog was about 8 chapters that he called a blog book that he was writing called Ordinary Mystic or Ordinary Mystics. And this was his explication of this modern day Nazir sort of story that he's telling, or kind of advice he's giving. Okay, is that a good kind of setting the stage? So I really tried hard to act. It's 8 chapters, and I just sort of tried to really kind of select passages that cut to the heart of it. I had a hard time searching for it after I found it. I had a hard time finding it again. So it's in some corner of the internet. So I hope if you want to see the whole thing, I hope you can find it. If you search Ordinary Mystic, Rabbi Rami Shapiro, Nazarite Vow, maybe Marian can do some wizardry and find it for everyone that wants it. I don't know. But at least I did do some excerpting. And here we go, guys. So excerpts. Why did I say excerpt? Excerpts. Oops. Huh. From Rabbi Rami Shapiro's blog book, Ordinary Mystic, okay?
You misspelled from, as long as you're doing edits.
Oh, I did, didn't I? Thank you. Okay. Deep breath. All right. So again, remember these are excerpts from different 8 chapters. So there's going to be some jumping, but I think it's coherent. It's coherent in the end. I'm always amazed when I meet someone who has become Bal Tshuva, a returnee to traditional Jewish life. I admire their zeal and respect their choice, but it isn't and will never be mine. Judaism was never the point of being Jewish. God was and is the point. Judaism was the means to reaching God, and when it failed to function in this capacity, God sent prophets to point out this and urge the people to get back on track. That is why the prophets are always decrying the focus on temple sacrifice. That is why Isaiah dismisses the people's ritual fasts in favor of a fast of the heart that focuses on liberating self and others from the prison of injustice, selfishness, and hubris. Judaism is not about being Jewish. Being Jewish is not about adhering to the law. Judaism and Jewishness are about God. And God is all about unity, justice, compassion, forgiveness, and humility. What does this have to do with the Nazarite vow? I think one of the reasons the vow was created was to offer people a chance to shift their focus from religion to spirituality, from the cult of the priests to a direct encounter with God in, with, and as all things. So I tried it again. It jumps to Rabbi Rami trying to do the Nazarite vow. So this is sort of the end of that episode. So I tried it again, and he kind of failed. No bars, no barbers, no morgues became my mantra. That's how he boils down the three strictures of Nazaritism. No bars, no barbers, no morgues became my mantra. I turned it into a t-shirt slogan and a bumper sticker. I liked the sound of it, but the reality was that it just didn't matter. Since when did you become such a literalist? A friend of mine asked when I shared with her my efforts as a Nazarite. You don't take anything in the Bible literally, and all of a sudden you have reduced this one portion to no bars, no barbers, no morgues. Come on, what does this say to you? She was right. My entire approach to Judaism had been one of the creative iconoclast. Why was I imitating the past rather than using it as a catalyst for innovation? Great description of liberal Judaism at its best, right? I went back to the text to see what it means and not just what it says. The answer was so clear you have probably thought of it yourself. So now he's going to say his interpretation of the three, no barbers, no bars, no morgues. Abstaining from wine means avoiding mind-numbing stimulants, television reality shows, infomercials, maybe even television itself. Dear God, say it ain't so. Hair is an almost universal sign of power. Think of Samson. Not cutting your hair means growing your own sense of power, your own self-esteem, self-reliance, and self-worth. Dead bodies are, well, dead bodies. What do I make of this? It took me a bit of reflection, but it soon came to me that while I was not about to find a dead body in the street, I would not be so sure of this if I still lived in Miami or Los Angeles, which isn't all that funny now. I could find lots of them in my own head. Dead bodies were the dead ideas I schlepped around with me. Dead bodies were the corpses of old, rotting, negative thoughts that haunted me. Avoiding dead bodies was abstinence from dead and deadening habits of mind. Now I was onto something. I tried the vow one more time. This time I gave up wine and grape juice along with other intoxicants, television, movies, newspapers, radio, and even gossip. I didn't cut my hair, and I began to focus on growing my power by being of greater service to others. And I spent time looking for dead bodies, dead thoughts that keep me from experiencing my unity with, in, and as God. I ended the period of the vow the same way I did before, but this time I felt different. The 5 days, so he only did 5 days, of this revised Nazarite period were rich with insights. While I did not have it down just right, I knew I was heading in the right direction. There is only, I guess, probably one reason to take the Nazarite vow, and that is to set aside time to focus more intensely on God and godliness. The key to success of the Nazarite vow is its brevity and rarity. If you could live the Nazarite way all the time, you wouldn't need the vow at all, right? The intent of the Nazarite vow is to allow you periods of cleansing and clarity. These moments will impact the rest of your life, but they need not define the rest of your life. Taking the Nazarite vow will change things. As you become clearer about your relationship to God, you will become more godly in your relationship with others. The Nazarite vow is like a spiritual booster shot. It makes sense once in a while, but it can be deadly if done too often. A Nazarite is a person who dedicates a certain portion of her life to God and godliness. It might be a day, a week, or a month. The rule of the Nazarite are simple. Abstain from wine, don't cut your hair, avoid dead bodies. Or as I prefer to put it, no bars, no barbers, no morgues. The Nazarite vow is for students, householders, parents, marrieds, and singles, anyone whose life is so busy that going off on a spiritual retreat is a seeming impossibility. While I am a great supporter of retreating from the world now and again, and a huge fan of solitude, I spend most of my days happily alone. I recognize the fact that for many, a week-long retreat is just not in the cards. Taking the Nazarite vow is not about retreating from your life, but engaging every aspect of it with a heightened sense of purpose. A Nazarite is an ordinary mystic meeting the everyday obligations of her normal life. A Nazarite is what my friend and teacher Brother Wayne Teasdale calls being a monk in the world. This is what makes this little-known aspect of Jewish teaching so powerful. It is as if it were tailor-made for our hectic lifestyles. So why should you explore the Nazarite vow? 2 reasons. First, because no matter how observant or non-observant you may be, chances are you are not where you want to be in your relationship with God. Second, because no matter how strongly you yearn for God, chances are your lifestyle and obligations to family, friends, and coworkers make it impossible for you to shape your life around strict spiritual discipline. You don't have the time, the freedom, the privacy, or even the inclination to become a monk or a nun. You might fantasize about going on a 3-month Buddhist retreat, but you will never get around to actually doing it. It isn't that you're lazy or weak-willed, it's that you are living in the world and you just can't get away from it. The Nazarite vow allows you to be a monk in the world. I know that's repetitive. It helps you set aside a part of your life to be more God-focused without asking you to drop any of the obligations of your life that your life normally carries. As a Nazarite, you continue to meet your obligations to family, friends, school, work, and the rest of your life. You do not retreat from the world. You do not take time off. You simply, though not easily, shift your focus so that all these obligations become arenas for God encounter. This cannot be overemphasized. The Nazarite does not leave home or abandon community. This is not a matter of going on retreat or isolating yourself from others. Taking the Nazarite vow challenges you to find in the midst of the hectic and harried moments of your everyday life opportunities for God encounter. The Nazarite still has to pick up the kids and take them to soccer practice. But now he does so with an eye to being of service to others. The Nazarite still has to go to her department meeting, but now she does so as an opportunity to practice being just, compassionate, and humble. The Nazarite doesn't change the externals of her life, she changes the internal focus of her living. I thought and still think that the Nazarite vow is a way to engage everyday life as an ordinary mystic, and it is more ordinary mystics the world so desperately needs. An ordinary mystic is a person who may or may not have time for disciplined spiritual practice, but who can shape a period of time around the ideals symbolized by the slogan, no bars, no barbers, no morgues. An ordinary mystic is a person who longs to see self and other as reflections of the one. I am an ordinary mystic. I trust you are as well. I find the Nazarite vow keys to living out both our ordinariness and our mysticism. I hope that you find this to be true as well. My prayer is that you continue to experiment with the Nazarite vow, shaping it to suit your own character and situation, and allowing it to shape you in accord with the 7 qualities of holiness. May your life be full of wonder and free of unnecessary drama. May you listen to both Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination, without getting caught up in either. May you honor both the narrow and spacious in you and come to see them both as manifestations of God.
Amen. Nice.
Right?
Great.
So, I love that, right? I just really love that. I don't know if I'll ever do it, take the Nazarite vow, but I sure love the impetus behind it. That, again, that aha moment when his friend said to him, don't take it literally, play with it, be playful about it. There was something obviously for Rami, and I think for me too, compelling about the Nazarite vow, but it doesn't work the way it worked in the Torah. You have to kind of make it come to you or meet it halfway. So I'm going to leave my words. Let's have whatever comments or questions people have, and then let's give each other the priestly blessing, which is also in this Torah portion. Marian.
I just want to say I particularly like what he did with death, to change it to the death of those ideas that you carry around. They keep you from living and so on. That's a wonderful,
very poetic
sleight of hand. That's lovely.
Thank you. Anybody else? We're good? Well, that was fun. Honestly, that was a new teaching for me. Not that it was altogether. It was a new teaching, and I really enjoyed it. So, thank you for being part of it.
Same RN.
Amen. So,
have you ever thought about teaching a class on Rami Shapiro?
No, you know what? I will. When we get, I'd like to, when we get back to the synagogue, I'll do a university series on Rami. I think I did. Oh, I did. You know what I taught? I taught a class on his book. That was the reinterpretation of the Ten Commandments. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I did a whole university series about just that book. But yeah.
Where was I that month?
Yeah, it was a while ago. What's it called? It's so he rearranged the Ten Commandments to be the 10 something and all this
10 utterances.
Yeah, well, here's what he called them. But anyway, I actually find Rami. I find Rami to be sort of like a more accessible Zalman, and I love Zalman, but Zalman, Zalman had something that was hard to approach. He was he was such a genius, and Rami kind of is like a guy that's sitting next to you at the bar who happens to be this sort of spiritual sort of guru, and I think he's cultivated that actually, and Zalman, he's one of those people, like when he says stuff and writes stuff, it just works for me. Arthur Waskow's another for sure, all in different ways. But Rami, he was a Buddhist. He was born Jewish. He actually became a Buddhist, not just kind of played around with it. He was a Zen Buddhist. Came back to Judaism through the humanistic movement, which I think you guys know. I grew up with humanistic Judaism. So when I was a kid, he was sort of an emerging voice in humanistic Judaism. Then he went to the Reform seminary, but broke with them, became a humanistic rabbi, broke with them, and he moved on to Reconstructionism. He had a Reconstructionist synagogue in Miami for years, and then he became Jewish Renewal, left his synagogue, kind of becoming like a itinerant teacher. He's somewhere in Tennessee. And he's kind of just I think he's just one of these guys that just never felt like he fit in anywhere. Reform, Renewal, Reconstructionist, Buddhist. I think his upbringing was somewhat traditional and orthodox. And I think he just doesn't he feels constrained by all that. And so ultimately he's like his own thing. And yes, Helene, I think I will do that. When we're back comfortably in the synagogue, I will take a month and kind of try to work up an overall, kind of get the best of Rami. Yeah.
I just Googled him. I can't believe all the books he's written.
Oh, oh
my God.
Yeah. He's done translations of the Song of Songs and the Book of Proverbs, and he's very prolific. I mean, he's I think he's probably hyperactive, and he can't stop churning stuff out, which is good for us.
Yeah.
Maybe not so great for him.
If I remember correctly, Randy, he has a terrific sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah,
he does it liberally, which is part of why you feel as if he's the guy on the bar stool next to you.
Yeah.
That's the way he came across when he was CRC.
Loaded.
Yeah, my real long-lasting memory of him at CRC, he and then I'll stop. It was a Shabbat morning service, and he didn't lead the service, but he came up and did his thing, like a teaching, and he led us in a chant,
right?
And without telling us he was going to do it, he started to do basically a Sufi what do you call that? A whirling dervish deal. Mm-hmm. Starts jumping up and down, chanting, and whirling around. It was wild, and eventually people started to do it with him. And 3/4 of the congregation were it was wild. The energy was palpable. And I'm sure some people thought it was crazy, but it was really, and then he finishes up, and I'm sitting in the front with Susan Talvi, Rabbi Susan, and she looks at me, and it was bombastic what he did. And Susan looks at me and she says, "Why don't you finish the service?" So I didn't. So I went up there, and it was kind of and I said, how do you follow that? So I decided to kind of play the classical reform rabbi after this sort of like transcendent, like,
Yeah.
I said, please turn to page 34 of your prayer books and read responsively. But it was like Susan was like, I'm not going up there.
Wasn't that the one where we put the Yud Hey Vav Hey on ourselves?
Yeah.
And then in the Lunch and Learn, he talked about some of my favorite lines. He was teaching at a Bible school in Nashville, Tennessee, and they were always trying to convert him because he was the only Jew, and he just said, "Don't try that on me. It doesn't take."
Yeah.
He was so good.
Yeah. So I'm glad I found it. I was like so nervous today because I was at CRC yesterday and I grabbed a bunch of stuff, but I didn't look for that file, unfortunately. And I got panicked today and I finally found it. I was so happy when I found it. So anyway, of course, this is the portion with the Birkat HaKohanim. And so I put my arms around you with love, and I wrote about this. It's the cover of the memo, the June and July memo. I wrote about like how we have to do this virtually now, but hopefully soon we'll be able to be back to it. But here we go. Yivarechecha Adonai. I'll sing it. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. God bless you and keep you always. Adonai, God's light shine down upon you and always be kind and loving and warm and gracious to you.
Shalom.
And may you have peace. May the streets of our city know peace. May the world know peace. May we know healing. May we know justice. May we continue to hold each other even when we can't be physically near each other. Please know I am here. I'm here if you need to reach out to me. And thanks for being you. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Amen.
doing that.
Good night, guys. Lila Tov.
Bye.